Hi everyone. I wanted to create a video of a dissection of a wolf sentence because they're quite complicated, and it's a good example of how a phrase can act as a noun and the subject of a clause, a whole phrase acting as a noun and a subject. So let's go through this sentence from The Death of the Moth. And notice that up at the top, I've put a little cheat sheet of what things can come to the right of the different types of verbs. And I think this is going to really help all of you identify verb types. So the first thing you should be doing now when you dissect sentences is to look for the verb. I think it's the easiest thing to identify, and everything then is to the left or to the right of the verb, and you know what those elements are supposed to be. So the net would be thrown is our verb here. And when I look to the right, I see that into the air again is a prepositional phrase, adverb, answering where. There's only two types of verbs that can be followed by an adverb, and that's the be verb, which we know this is not because thrown, would be thrown. These are our helping verbs, but we have that main verb thrown. The other type that can take an adverb is the intransitive. So we know that to be thrown is an intransitive verb. Also, the sentence could stand on its own if there were no adverb following it, which is another indicator that it's an intransitive verb, meaning it's not transferring anything to another noun. The verb isn't taking something from one noun and going to another noun. It's just a verb that can stand on its own in an independent clause. So the net is our subject, would be thrown is our intransitive verb, and into the air is our prepositional phrase adverb. And then we have another prepositional phrase in a wider circle this time, answering where, so that's an adverb. And then another prepositional phrase with the utmost clamor and vociferation, answering how it was thrown. Then, as though to be thrown into the air and settle slowly down upon the treetops were a tremendously exciting experience. This one's a little tricky. If you didn't recognize as though as a subordinator, you might get really confused with this sentence. But notice that we have a verb in here. So if we're following our rule to always look for a verb first, we would see the were, the past tense of be. So we have a be verb, and then I'm going to look up here and see what can follow a be verb, and I notice that we have an article right here, so I know that a noun is following this be verb. So it's a be verb with a subject complement noun. So let's mark that. But what's the subject? This is where this sentence gets pretty interesting. So let's mark that this is a subordinator DC, but let me show you what the subject is here. We have the to plus thrown, which is an infinitive phrase, because remember, you can't have a verb acting as an action word if it's with the to infinitive form. So to be is our verbal phrase. To be thrown into the air and settle slowly down upon the treetops is the one whole huge long verbal phrase acting as a noun, and it's acting as the subject of the DC, the verb being were. So the act of being thrown into the air and settled slowly down upon the treetops were a tremendously exciting experience. And I think that's a really good example of how things can be embedded and how phrases could act as nouns.